Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar on using M0 to pave the path to infrastructure as code maturity. Today, I have Sergey Korolev with me from Viber. Sergey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so a few words about myself. I've been in the area of DevOps and managing teams that are working in this field of DevOps for the last 10 years. Beside that, I like traveling, I like snowboarding, and doing martial arts in my free time. Yeah, thank you.
Nice. Where was the furthest destination you've traveled for snowboarding?
Utah last year,
Oh,
actually. Yeah.
nice. Park City?
Nearby, I think it was it's called Bluebird, I think,
Okay,
if I'm not
awesome.
mistaken. And for me, it's far away, like whole continent away. So
Yes. Okay, very good. My name's Andrew. I'm the Director of Sales Engineering here at M0, and today I'll be helping lead this conversation. We do have the chat open, so please please feel free to ask your questions in there, and then we'll address it during the Q&A portion of this conversation. And let's just get started. Before we begin, so let's just quick overview of what today we'll be talking about. So we'll be reviewing some challenges with Viber's previous CI/CD process, how they managed infrastructure as code, the cultural shifts related to that, and what that really meant in terms of managing resources and deployments. And at what point did the previous process come to a breaking point? So what was that tipping point for change? And just before we begin this conversation, let's quickly review M0. M0 is your ability to fast track your infrastructure as code maturity. What we've seen in the market is a lot of times people are starting with no infrastructure as code, ClickOps and manual deployments, which is slow. And they start scripting and adding some infrastructure as code, but that creates cost overruns and security challenges. At M0, we're trying to optimize both productivity and governance through four main pillars: automation, cost controls, managed self-service, and governance. So we'll be addressing some of these features that Viber's been able to take advantage of and talk more about how we were helping Viber move along this maturity curve. Okay, so let's go into Viber's. So on a high level, what was your kind of like the biggest game changer? What was moving that value?
yeah, so when we started with N0, I guess the first thing that gave us the most value was drift detection. It's probably also the first topic we are going to be discussing today. So basically just understanding where do we stand in terms of like how our Terraform states look like, right? And I will be describing like exactly where we started from and where we at today's time. So yeah, I guess drift detection is the thing that actually helped us a lot, especially in the first few phases of onboarding.
Awesome. So let's just jump right into it then. In terms of drift detection, let's go into kind of like before and after. What did you see?
Yeah, so before onboarding to N0, it would be like, I don't know, I guess a lot of the participants in this chat know about this feeling when you try to apply some Terraform and then you're like, oh, it's been changed like 2 years ago. And for some reason, I don't know who did that and where I can find him now or why he did the change he did. So basically detecting drifts, this is the term that is being used, like a long time after the actual apply or the actual change happened, right? So you basically just see it whenever you run a plan or apply. And you can check that, at least how we used it. We would check it only at this phase. Like you need to do a change, you do the change. Oh no, like the state is not what I was expecting it to be. And now I need to fix the previous change that somebody else did. And of course, there was no process to regularly check whether the states have been changed, the actual resources have been changed or not. And once we've onboarded M0, we detected that basically 60% of all our states or all our Terraform so-called environments in M0 are like that. And just like to let you know, we've been using Terraform at least at the form for the scanned environments for at least for about 2 years with between 7 to 10 committers, I think. So plenty of hands touch this code and not the code, right? So it could be either the code or the actual resources in AWS for our case. Now, after taking the environments and basically putting them inside of Env0, adding those environments, adding our code being managed by Env0, you can see on the right hand in the screenshot that today we have more than 900 of those. Most of them are not drifted. Of course, drift happens due to some maybe manual changes or other changes people or some automation that might run and change resources in AWS, or like in ECS, for example, there are things that are being changed by the service itself, and you need to correlate the infrastructure as code to that. And we have these scans every other day. So basically we are running a plan on all of our environments, okay, every other day, and detecting whether those environments, whether the Terraform that represented there is the actual resources that we have in our cloud environment. And I can see it easily in this dashboard. It's very convenient, something I do every and each day. And me as a manager, bugging my engineers for like, you need to fix that. Why is it drifted, right? Eventually we reduced it to 0. And as time goes on, you can see that the drift is going back and forth, but we tend to eliminate it as much as possible. Some drifts are eliminated easier than others. But yeah, and as we go on with the talk, I will also describe how this, in my opinion, is leading to a cultural shift in our team.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next topic then. Environment discovery. So let me just quickly inform the audience what environment discovery is at M0. So it's basically the ability to be able to scan for code changes within your Git repo and automatically onboard that into M0. And another way I like to describe it is kind of self-service through code. So as your developers are creating, here you can see in the image, a new Terraform stack and in a folder, M0 essentially detects that through the PR process and will generate the plan and then deploy that resource once it's been approved. So Sergey, go ahead.
Yeah, so talking about that, initially, like I think it was about 1.5 years ago, environment discovery was not that advanced as it's now. So that's a good fit. Whoever is joining now will have it much easier upon yourselves. But yeah, like the cool thing about that is that any Terraform I'm adding, so let's say I have this kind of folder structure where I have an integration environment, I have some infrastructure. Let's say I have EKS and I have some integration cluster there. So basically the integration cluster is an environment. And now I want to, for example, add another cluster, or I want to add a new service that I was not managing before, for example, ECS. And all I need to do after I configured the environment discovery in Env0, I just add the folder, right? And the same GitOps trigger will basically trigger Env0 to add an environment according to the new structure of the folder. And this is something that we benefit a lot at this point. In my opinion, we benefit a lot from it because it's just straightforward. You add your Terraform and it's being run somewhere else, not on your computer, for example. Something I will be also probably talking about in the next few slides. Yeah, I guess that's as much as it goes in terms of the environment discovery itself. Maybe another thing that I would add is that once you discover the environment, so all the new discovered environments are going through the same process of, let's say, if you need linting or governance checks or some tests that you want to apply on your environments or your Terraform, it is going to be something that is applied the same way for all Terraform, right? It's not as if somebody runs lint on their computer and it's going to be applied or not. And you don't know actually. So this this is also where we started. Like people would run Terraform on their machines, and each and every one in the team might or might not follow the best practices. So let's say everybody should run lint, but I would not have the tool to govern that. I would not have the tool to say everyone is running lint, no matter what. At least from the standpoint where people are running the Terraform from their machines. I think we can go to the next one.
Okay, let's talk about GitOps then.
Yeah, so I briefly mentioned it before. Regarding GitOps, so this is something that is very close to heart. We've been using Argo CD for the past 3 years or so. And we find it very convenient just making change in Git and having this change go on as you proceed with whatever strategy that you choose. But for example, if you open a merge request, you have kind of a, let's say in Terraform, you would have a plan. If you merge this merge request or pull request, you will actually run and apply, right? This is basically the general idea here. And we try to implement it ourselves. So we implemented kind of a testing mechanism that we would run a plan and then an apply of an example for our environments prior to onboarding NF0. And it was a hassle. Like it was a hassle to implement the solution itself. It was a hassle to maintain it and actually make sure that people are not just skipping the pipeline itself and just submitting the changes, right? Because also, as I mentioned, we did not have the actual applying plan of the actual infrastructure as part of the pipeline. And we've reviewed Atlantis. I tried to see where it fell short exactly. I didn't find the exact things that made it not work for us. I think it was something involving us using GitLab Enterprise and Atlantis not supporting it at the time. And also it's a CLI tool, which you need to orchestrate more things around to make it actually work. Like you will need to implement a whole thing in your CI/CD pipelines to make it work as you expect. Again, at the time, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago when we tested it. Maybe it's better now. I don't know. Now, another thing is that, as I mentioned, everybody could just run their Terraform as they wished. And this is how we used to do it prior. And me as a manager, I would not see these changes, right? And from personal experience, one of the things that could happen is that you run the Terraform locally and you go on to another task, but not submitting the commit, right? So then you get the drift in your Terraform because you did not submit the code to Git. And need to understand who did the change and why he did it, and eventually discovering that somebody just forgot to submit a commit.
Can you talk more about, there's a question from the audience about Argo
Yeah.
CD and whether
Yeah.
or not is it replacing Argo CD? Is it running, are you still running Argo CD on the side? Does M0 interact with Argo CD in any which way?
Yeah, so for us it was pretty straightforward that in our use case, we will probably not use M0 for deploying Kubernetes, just because we already had that and we had this expertise, and we are totally fine with Argo CD, but it's complementary. One of the cool things that you could do is, for example, and this is what we are doing, deploying the whole Argo CD infrastructure itself in Kubernetes via M0. So you need to deploy the so to say, operator of Argo CD. You do it through M0, through Terraform. Similarly, you can deploy basically any Helm chart, either via M0's capabilities to deploy Helm charts, or through Terraform providers to deploy Helm charts. Both ways work. But we chose to stay with Argo CD for deploying Kubernetes. We really like this ecosystem, and they remained as a complementary system to one another.
Great, thank you. Let's talk about the next topic then.
Sure.
Cost management. How does M0 help you with managing cost?
Yeah, so if you look at the right screen here, you will probably see that one of our environments is pretty costly, right? So if you compare the ones on the on the right, there is one which is pretty costly. Reviewing it because I saw it in M0, discovering is basically a CloudFront distribution that is getting a lot of requests, a lot of traffic, and this is why it costs as it does. And basically, like in cost management, initially when starting, I didn't think of it as a thing that I might be so much interested, because we had so many other GitOps, FinOps tools that we are grabbing information from. Like we have anomaly detection, you have the cost explorer, you might have some third party that do that for you, and you have like all these kind of things that you're managing cost. Now, and it depends how and what is the approach of your company. You might have dedicated FinOps engineers. You might have like DevOps doing the FinOps, and you might have your software engineers doing FinOps, right? So it depends on the company strategy regarding FinOps as general. And I think from a perspective of a DevOps engineer, you're not going into Cost Explorer every commit or every change you do in infrastructure. And you will probably like review your environments and review your Terraform code most often than reviewing your costs, okay? Especially if a FinOps is a different group or a different team or a different person in your organization. So putting it in your face, basically, is something that helping us extend our FinOps practices, extend our FinOps options and visibility. It does not necessarily replace those, but and there is another thing regarding that, is that we can see exactly which resources are costing what amount of money, right? I said that an environment is representing a Terraform folder, for example. So you know exactly which resources are in this Terraform folder, in this Terraform state, and you can say exactly how much they cost, which is really cool. Also, it is relatively simple to configure. So basically, I think TerraTag is M0's open source tool, right?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, so it's just incorporated in M0 itself. And basically what it does, it just adds on top of your state file, adds the needed tags for your environment ID, project ID. Okay. And then you configure your cost explorer and your billing so that those tags are tracked, and you can see by these tags of env0 environment, for example, how much these specific resources cost you according to this tag. And all that was just an addition that you basically just enable it. It's relatively easy to configure. I think it took me an hour or so to do the whole configuration. So it's a feature that I like a lot. I would not say again that it changed the whole FinOps practices in our company, but for sure led me to some interesting environments that I immediately saw that something is wrong, right? Especially that this is a tool that I'm using each and every day.
Cool. Cool. So with all these different topics, I'd love to better understand how did it affect your company culture?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say company because and in the next few slides, you'll see that we are going to talk about our future plans and how we see env0 part of it.
Mhm.
So today we are mostly using env0 as a tool for our DevOps engineers. And culturally, I think that things such auditing and governing our code became more of a everyday practice, something that we can introduce to the infrastructure as code more easily, right? And for Viber, for example, it's very important in terms of auditing and governance. Let's go like to a different topic, that's Git and commits and changes in Git. So we have governance over it. We need like audits, and we have, for example, like a 4I principle, basically practice where we have somebody mandatorily check our code and approve it. So same goes for infrastructure as code. And with this in mind, we also implement the governance and auditing of everything via env0 as well. And another thing that in the culture of our team, something that changed is the set of mind of not breaking the states, right? Keeping the broken states as low as possible and reducing the tech debt. And I think when you're talking about the long run, you want to keep your tech debt as low as possible for the current team
Mm.
and the future people to come. You don't want to come to a place where you'll need to fight those things breaking all the time, or broken things that are there for years. And I guess many of the participants today know exactly what I'm talking about. And of course, it did not eliminate everything, but I think the right mindset will eventually get us to this point.
Cool. Yeah, cultural change definitely is hard and takes the right people in place and the processes in order to help move that along. And but tools can only do so much. So I'd love to talk next about kind of your expectations, your experience for onboarding with M0. So there are naturally expectations, and I think this will be really interesting for people who are just gonna start looking at M0 or considering. So let's talk kind of like these 5 different parts here. When you're talking about transferring pipelines, what was your expectation and what was the reality?
Yeah, so I would expect like onboarding all of our environments, especially talking about a Terraform like library that consists of all those kind of Terraform and different structures and different ways that were applied. I expected it to be less straightforward. Back in the day, it took me about, I think, 2 weeks to, let's say, do it end to end. And today, we are using the auto discovery feature to just continuously onboard new environments automatically. So it doesn't take any more effort anymore.
Cool. What about visibility? You mentioned here, like, you were concerned about how would you actually see the resources in M0 and policies and things like that?
Yeah, so I didn't have the chance to introduce it here, but in general, what you can see besides the dashboard that I showed, that you see the all environments and their statuses and whether they are drifted or not. So if you would click on any of the environments, for example, you will see an audit of all the deployments that have been done, right? And you can see who did it, why they did it, when they did it, all the phases of the life cycle of a specific deployment. Let's say it's starting by initializing the Terraform and then planning it, applying it, and some steps in between, which can be the tagging that I told you about with TerraTag. It can be linting as a step. You can add custom scripts to it. OPA, I think, is also like a plugin that you can add. And yeah, so again, from a manager perspective, it's so convenient for me to understand what my team is working on. From an engineer, going back and just reviewing, okay, which changes were done to some resources that I own, also is something that we value a lot.
Definitely a lot of our customers and prospective are concerned about auditability and being able to track exactly what happened, especially when you're coming from a manual deployment process or even just simple pipelines, because in general, CI pipelines are harder to go through as opposed to what you have here in M0. You can click on the infrastructure and see exactly what those changes were. I love this third expectation. We would love if everyone loved M0. What was your actual experience onboarding with M0 and people's reaction to using it?
Yeah. Yeah, so what we would expect, so as I said, like you can run all those kind of things such as linting and OPA and other scripts. So basically you have more steps that a plan would take, right? Locally, you can initialize it one. You have all the files that you need locally downloaded from your backend, and basically rerun it as much as you want, so you don't need to initialize it again. The plan will run probably faster, the apply, and everything will be running relatively faster on local machine due to the fact that you have all the files locally all the time.
Right.
And people were hanging on to that. They would tell me it was fast for me. I don't see the reason why I need to run all these additional steps. What does it give me? And the answer is consistency, right? And like if you, as I said, like if you have policies in the company that you regulatory policies that you must follow those policies. It's not a matter of a question. It's a matter of you have to do it. And people running things locally without applying those policies on their runs, eventually, hopefully not, but can lead to issues. And I don't say that like running it in a managed environment and going through all the policies on all the tests and whatever will result in 0 errors and no like issues and no mistakes from people, but at least you will have an audit for it. At least you will understand what happened. You hopefully will find out about the issue faster. That's what I tend to believe. But yeah, people kept holding to this philosophy of running things locally. Now, again, it's not a false thing at this point as well, but I see that people are very careful about when to do it and why.
Good. Good. This next topic about drift. This is an interesting one because it kind of turns into a double-edged sword. Can you tell us more about your experience?
Well, so I think I mentioned it before, right? We started off with about 60% drifted environments. It took us, there is a specific engineer in my team which is very dedicated to eliminating drifted environments, but and he's doing it for quite a while now. Like for the past, I think, year or so, he's especially those specific cases which are really hard to tend to. Some changes that were made like years ago, and yeah, I mean, first thing first, handling drifted environments is a pain in the ass, and as long as you keep this drift, you will have a harder time in the future. And this is exactly why I tend to encourage everybody to treat it as fast as possible. But more than that, and I see in the column of the reality, the things that we started also doing is thinking about how to modularize our environments and our deployments better. So basically, again, it depends on the use case and the scenario, but there are use cases where you say, I want to just write the Terraform as plainly as possible, and you do so. But in a few days or like after some time, you realize that this request is coming back to you again and again and again, right? So now you need to understand what is the request and how you can modularize it better. So this is actually not a simple task. You need to understand exactly what your customers, or in our case, the engineers, need, and what is the recurring request that requires a specific solution. We have some use cases where we use the templates of env0, which is basically like a wrapper for modules, let's say. And we use that to deploy some resources in the cloud, which are reusable. For example, like a simple example, we have a team that uses Lambda functions a lot. So we basically have this module which is representing their needs in the for the Lambda function and its environment. And we redeploy it as a module using the env0 templates. And we find it like very time saving eventually, but initially it would have been like harder to do it.
Because it wasn't modularized yet and it wasn't as There's a question from the audience about where the drift is coming from. So earlier you mentioned there was 60% of the drift. Was it because people were doing local applies, or what else was causing that drift?
Yeah, so let's say that a simple scenario from the day of a DevOps engineer, at least as I see it. So our DevOps engineers are having full admin access to the environments. We are owning end-to-end the whole cloud environment. So basically, let's say we have an issue and we have at some team in production, and you need to change. The simplest one would be changing I don't know, auto-scaling group and its amount of instances, right? It's a simple change. And if you have a production issue, you might change this thing manually in the console of AWS. And you'll need to probably revert it, right? So the drift will indicate like, I don't know, you had 10 instances, you change it to 20, and now you need to revert it. And this is the detected drift. Now, this is a specific, very small change, but it can be related to any service. and any change, and specifically urgent changes is something that you can see drifts come in handy, like detecting like the drifts are coming from urgent changes that require immediate action. So yeah.
Cool. And this is also the last expectation here. We get asked a lot, especially since CI/CD, there's so much tooling and what scope does M0 have? So can you tell us a bit more about this expectation? Does M0 replace everything?
No, not really, because and then I described it in the part we talked about GitOps, right? And in the slide there, you can also see the pipeline itself. So basically, Env0 is integrated into our Git pipelines. You can see the pipeline itself showing you the whole like plan and apply and all the steps that are happening in Env0 itself. So technically, you can avoid going into the Env0 system and just using your pipelines as is through Git, for example. Also, you can use the API and or like Terraform modules of Env0 and API to integrate it with different other tools that you're using in your company. For example, let's say IDP, and this is something that we plan for the future.
Yeah.
So
That's a good transition to talk about future plans then.
yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about, you've onboarded with M0, you've been using M0 for a while now. What else is kind of like, tell us about your journey or your future journey.
Yeah, so a few things that important to me is the governance aspect. Talked about it quite a lot today. And this is the policy enforcements. Whoever is familiar with tools such as OPA is something that we are looking forward to incorporate. Expanding our developer portal for self-service via Env0 for the cloud resources, right? So basically for us, we have this is answering probably again answering for the question for the audience is integrating Env0 for developers at our use case. We do not expose Env0 for the developers. We use it as something in the background. We are waiting for a few features that we hope will come soon. Is infrastructure as code coverage control and drift blame. So I can blame the engineers for doing it. No, I'm kidding. But drift blame is a term that is being used describing basically if somebody did something in the console, right? About those ASG changes, like somebody changed the amount of minimum instances, for example, from 10 to 20, I would want to know who did that. So this is also something that we are eager to get as a feature in the future. And the last point here is talking about maturity journey. So we are not there yet. Like we are using the GitOps approach, and we have Env0 managing and governing our environment, but we are still not at the self-service level. We still have work to do in the componentization, like because this is like also strategy, right? You need to understand what you want to componentize and which features you want to introduce as a self-service. So we're working on those.
Cool. Very good. Thank you for sharing your experience. Let's open up to open Q&A. please feel free to add more questions into the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. And while we're waiting for other questions, maybe there's a question about your separation of Argo CD. How do you separate resources that need to be automatically deployed by M0 and others that need to be deployed by Argo CD?
Would you repeat that once again?
How do you separate resources that need to be automatically deployed by M0 and then others that need to be deployed by Argo CD?
Yeah, I get the question. So at this point, we don't have a solution just yet. The way we are looking at it is that we will probably use the IDP, and together with Argo CD's detection of new applications, right? So basically M0 will detect Terraform, and Argo CD will detect the application, right? So basically same approach on both ends. So you will need to add the Terraform code and the Helm chart or manifest, however you are using it. And each of the systems will separately deploy the resources that are needed. So for us, the approach is to use IDP, like a developer portal, where a developer can trigger the process, and there are two different stages, and each stage is deploying whether Helm chart, whether cloud resources.
I actually have, I'll put in the chat a blog post where it shows M0 deploying. Earlier, Sergey mentioned this. You deploy your Kubernetes cluster, but you need to bootstrap Argo CD onto your Kubernetes cluster. So you're using either Helm chart or Terraform deploying Helm chart. You can deploy Argo CD's operator into your Kubernetes cluster. Now, in order to configure Argo CD to essentially listen to new applications, you can deploy the application YAML, which is the Argo CD's CRD for managing applications. So you can then use also M0 to manage those application YAMLs if you want, essentially deploy Kubernetes manifests directly into your Argo CD cluster. And then now, essentially what is going to happen, M0 will continue to listen for any sort of infrastructure as code changes, any Terraform being updated. So all that is managed to GitOps. Argo CD, likewise, because you've configured Argo CD to listen, Argo CD will just listen to whatever image change, manifest change, and it will then manage its own. So essentially GitOps on both sides, listening to their own hooks within Git. Or, yeah.
Yeah, just another word about this topic is that you have application sets in Argo CD. You also have an approach which called app of apps, basically one application that holds many applications. So for us, it would be, at least at this point, we are at the point where we have the app of apps deployed via Terraform, and it is managing the whole other applications. So yeah, also might be useful.
There was a question here. Have you used M0's environment workflow? And before you answer that question, I guess you answer the question, I'll describe workflow.
Yeah, all right, go ahead.
So workflow for the audience in M0 is essentially an orchestrator of multiple templates that allows you to deploy a multi-layer infrastructure. So say you have a 3-tier infrastructure, network, compute, and services. You can keep each of these different services as separate Terraform templates or Terraform resources, and M0 will orchestrate and make sure it deploys in the right order. So that's a high level what an M0 workflow is. The question is, are you using it? And if so, what has your experience been?
Yeah, so I would say no. Like we've evaluated some use cases that we have before, but we did not eventually we end up not using it at this point at least.
Okay. Let's look at another question here. I'm interested in the order of magnitude. How many workspaces how many of these are templated and auto-discovered? And how long do they usually live? So how many M0 environments or Terraform workspaces are you managing with M0, roughly?
So in total, yeah, so roughly is I presented it before in the dashboard, and one of the slides is about 900 of those. Most of those are environments that are pointing and discovered in some Git repository that we have that holds most of our Terraform code. And basically, each folder eventually is an environment. Most of those are not templated, right? But we have some use cases which are templated. As I described, like I gave one example, the Lambda functions. We have another
function. Yep.
Static websites that we deploy, that we use templated. Yeah, and I think another one that we consider using is with the self-service that we want to introduce eventually. Those will be also templated environments.
Here's a question. We are planning to force all development to be deployed by a central code catalog that's maintained by a single infra team. Is this something M0 is seeing more? Or are teams still able to develop infrastructure as code themselves? I guess I will answer that one. So as you heard from Sergey's perspective, right now they are developing infrastructure as code themselves and slowly introducing templates to other team members. At M0, working with the dozens and dozens of customers we were working with, and we see a plethora of a spectrum. So some are completely siloed and command and control, I would say. So basically, the central team is managing all of the resources and deploying all the resources. And then some are having a catalog approach. So they create essentially a set of resources that dev teams can onboard onto, and then let the dev teams choose. And then some are mixed in the sense that they have subject matter experts within each of the dev teams. So those people would like to write infrastructure as code. But then you have also the people on the opposite side of the spectrum who don't know any infrastructure as code and need a catalog in order to get access to resources. So in M0 with templates, you can essentially create these quote unquote modules that will be able to give access to resources to these developers who aren't familiar with infrastructure. At the same time, those modules you can publish in M0's module registry for the developers who are familiar with infrastructure and want to compose their own resources. You can use what we described earlier, the environment discovery, and give them the ability to get access and deploy their own infrastructure as code through a PR process as well. So we're definitely seeing the spectrum, and it really kind of depends on the kind of people you have within your organization and the type of processes that you want to put in place. And M0 can really help cover both sides of that. And I hope that helps give you a sense of capabilities within M0. Okay. Maybe we'll take one more question. Any more questions from the audience? Okay. For the questions that we didn't get to go into, they're a little bit more about M0 in general. Maybe what I'll do is segue into closing statements. So thank you again, Sergey, for taking this time to meet with us. Any last words about kind of experience with M0?
Yeah, I guess there is a motto in life for me is taking things slow, and this is a process, right? And we are in it for the last 1.5 years, and it will take more time. So yeah, this would be probably
Absolutely.
mine for you as well.
let's keep on making steps towards climbing that mountain. So thank you for taking the time. So I want to end on this one note. Since you're now here at M0, you're probably interested in seeing how you can get started. At M0, we have this concept of a one-day proof of value. So essentially, we can help unlock and help you get understanding of how M0 can build value for you. It's easy 4-step process. We create an organization, add credentials, connect your Git repo, and start deploying resources in M0. And what we hope to achieve and can achieve within this one-day POC is simply be able to show you that GitOps process, show you the cost estimation, and start tracking cost and set up drift detection. We've done this with a few of our customers already and immediately added value and showing you what we can do. We'll do a 1-hour onboarding session to a pre-onboarding session in order to get you started. And then on that one day, we'll go through the whole entire checklist and get you onboarded. We'll set up Slack or team support for easy communication, and then give you a 30-day trial of M0 so that you can really start experiencing the ROI. After the 30-day trial, we expect you to reduce up to 45% of your cloud costs, increase your deployment speeds, and decrease your time to merge. And again, all we need to do is create an organization, set up some cloud credentials, connect to whatever version control system you're using, and deploy some Terraform or other infrastructure as code that you're using. If you're not ready for a one-day POC just yet and you want to learn more, you can book a demo through our website, m0.com/demo request, or sign up for a free trial immediately under app.m0.com, and check out m0.com for more docs and blogs and resources. I want to thank everyone attending again today. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to address those on a future call or through chat. All right, so that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you again, Sergey, for joining us, and hope to hear from everyone soon.